Number 10. Armour. Armour, aka Hisako Ichiki, is actually a pretty powerful X-Men, even in the 616 universe, who can create a psionic exoskeleton suit of armor. This exoskeleton is incredibly strong, durable, impenetrable, and it's fueled by energy from Hisako's ancestors in the 616 universe. But not in the Ultimate universe, no sir! In this universe, Armour's exoskeleton takes the shape of giant animals and even dragons sometimes. Oh, and also, in 1610, her exoskeleton is fueled by 10,000 mythological Japanese spirit demons. Like, how freaking awesome is that? Armour is cool and powerful enough that when the Ultimate Universe was destroyed, she was able to slip her way into the 616 Prime Universe, until she was kidnapped by Miss Sinister and eventually lost her life in X-Men Blue number 28 in 2018. Number 8. It's Wolverine. I'm gonna be honest, this version of Wolverine is a bit alarming in terms of his morals and preferences, and just his behavior in general is just a bit less heroic than his 616 counterpart. But despite that, it is hard not to admit that he is quite the powerful character. His healing factor is a bit different than his Prime version and is called a survival factor. That means he can survive being torn in half, departed from his head, and even blown up by a nuclear bomb. He can also detect lies and still has an adamantium skeleton. He was trained by Weapon X as an emotionless assassin, but when the Brotherhood hired him to take out Xavier, he proves he is more than just muscle, overcoming his brainwashing and joining the X-Men, although it may have also been because he fell in love with the teenage Jean Grey when he was like 30. Number 6. The Phoenix 5. In the 2012 crossover event Avengers vs. X-Men, the Cosmic Phoenix Force was coming to Earth, and when it arrived, it was split up into 5, giving our heroes a new problem in the form of the Phoenix 5. The quintet consisted of X-Men veterans including Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Magik, and Colossus, who began reshaping the world according to their will until they themselves became a threat. As each member of the 5 fell, those left standing got more and more powerful, leaving Scott and Emma, who were becoming more tyrannical by the minute. To stop the two of them, Professor X was recruited by Magneto, but the cosmic entity had consumed Scott and even basically made him betray Emma Frost to gain more power. After a mental battle between him and Xavier, Scott used his power to actually take the life of his father figure, mentor, and dear friend, becoming the Dark Phoenix until he was defeated by Hope Summers and Scarlet Witch. And at number 5 is X-Force. X-Force, the X-Men Black Ops team, Cyclops' own little hit squad. There are more than a few not so great things this sub-team has done. Cyclops forcing X-23 to be on the team, performing assassinations, etc, etc, it's all bad. But after Cyclops disbanded the team, Wolverine kept it going on his own, and they took on a bit of a sinister task when they decided to take out a younger cloned version of Apocalypse to prevent him becoming a threat. This particular assassination almost didn't go through, but then Phantom X just popped the little clone in the head. Yes, it's incredibly messed up, but hey, then he cloned the clone and raised it in a virtual reality to give it all the nurturing it needed to be a good Apocalypse. Number 4. Professor X Mind Wipe. Professor X has a history of just impulsively wiping and manipulating people's minds, which never goes well in the long run, but for some reason, he just keeps doing it, even to those he considers friends and colleagues. Reed Richards, with whom Xavier worked with on the Illuminati, which is a whole other bad time, feared for his son's life and built a machine that would take away a mutant's powers. Reed's son, Franklin Richards, is an incredibly powerful being with reality warping abilities and was believed to be a mutant, which he wasn't, but that's another story. Professor X took exception to the machine that Reed built, so he completely wiped away the knowledge of the machine from Richards' mind. He made sure that Richards would never be able to build another one ever again, tampering with the mind of a man he used to call a friend. Number 3. ICEMAN. In the 616 reality, Bobby Drake, aka ICEMAN, was one of the original X-Men and has achieved the classification of Omega level with his powers of cryokinesis and hydrokinesis. Now, in the Earth 1610 reality, he is actually one of the youngest members of the group, and it's almost as if he was kind of given a power boost. I know that doesn't make sense. How can you like boost an Omega level character? You can't. But he wields his powers in more interesting ways. He has always been able to transform his body, but he also creates gigantic ice trolls and ice walls. He's proven his worth by stopping a Weapon X invasion and the Ultimates all on his own. Professor Xavier himself has claimed that Iceman is one of the 3 most powerful X-Men, and he's probably not wrong. But I do gotta say, I don't know what they were thinking giving him the do-rag. I don't get it. And number 1, it's Jean Grey. Did you think it was gonna be anyone else? As an extremely powerful telepath and telekinetic, she is already a pretty tough character to take on. But as almost all of us know, Jean Grey is the host for the Phoenix Force, and that still remains the case here on Earth 1610. Only, she seems to use even more of that power. Unleashing a small fraction of her power melted the armor of Apocalypse, but her full might against him tore him apart atom by atom, causing him so much pain Apocalypse begged her to stop. Apocalypse begged her to stop. As the Phoenix, she reversed time, read people's minds, saved the whole team multiple times, and took off into space, literally traveling to what was essentially heaven. There is a reason people fear Jean Grey, and the Phoenix Force gives them all the more reason to poop their pants.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Blob. Fred Dukes, aka Blob, made his comic book debut back in Uncanny X-Men issue 3, and he got his powers when he was just a young man. He often looked at himself as this extra, super strong freak of nature at this point, just this giant, strong man whose temper often got the best of him. The X-Men met him at a carnival where he was using his might and muscle just to get by. And then when Scott Summers approached Blob and asked if he'd heard about the X-Men, he responds with, "Oh, those jerky juveniles in the corny costumes? Yeah, I've heard of those guys." First of all, rude. So he goes back and Charles has him tested. He has him pulling these massive chains so hard that he breaks these chains like King Kong. And then he starts to make a break for it, launching away any X-Men member in his path. So now he's gone, but now he knows everybody's real identity because he was there for a bit and then he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm out of here. So Charles had to track him down and then erase his memory from his brain. I had to start with Blob because he was so close to being a member. So much potential, and then he ended up picking the wrong team 3 issues later. But we had him for a bit. And before we continue on with this list, if you guys haven't already, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up because it helps our channel out so much. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to our list. Number 9, Vulcan. He named himself after the Roman god of fire, but Vulcan's real identity was that of Gabriel Summers. He was born after Cyclops and Havoc. Well, not really born, he was surgically removed from his mother's body and placed in an incubator accelerator, aged to be at his prime, and then sent back to Earth to work for Divan Shikari. He then escaped and was found by Moira McTaggart with no memories of who he is or where he came from. He was impressing Charles quite a bit and all he wanted to do was learn his mutant abilities. Sounds like the dream student. So Charles needed help from him and other newcomers to find the remaining X-Men after most of them had been depowered from the Scarlet Witch. So Charles put him in this danger room purely made of Charles' thoughts as a training exercise to get them sharp in a short amount of time. So inside it feels like months of training, but in actuality it's only a few hours. Then Vulcan and his new team were sent to Krakoa to rescue the original X-Men. But Vulcan revealed to Scott that Xavier sacrificed his own brother to save him. And then Kid Vulcan's true origins are shown, and in the next issue of Deadly Genesis, he's unleashed. Number 8, Frenzy. Joanna Cargill made her first comic book debut in X Factor issue 4 when she accidentally punched her father so hard that her hand went through his chest. Now her father was by no means a good person at all, but I mean doesn't mean he deserved to go out like that. Plus finding out you're a mutant at that time in that way must have been pretty traumatizing. She became known as Frenzy and she joined the Allegiance of Evil. After the Acolytes disbanded, Joanna became an ambassador for Genosha and stood by Magneto until she was captured by the US government in order to learn more about Magneto. But she didn't talk. She kept her mouth shut until Jean Grey entered and freed her, giving her the option to join the X-Men the easy way or the hard way. Jean used the hard way and then Frenzy's entire attitude was changed just like that. Her brain was different. Now her personality was campy, it was awkward, and not nearly as confident as before. But she did help the X-Men find Magneto's base. She was a team member even if it was forced and awkward. After Magneto's defeat, her mind control was released and she rejoined the Acolytes and left the X-Mansion. Again, a little brief, but it still counts.
Number 7, PSYLOKKE. Colonel Betsy Braddock of Strike is England's most powerful telepath, capable of reading minds, creating psychic grenades that explode in the minds of others, and one of her coolest powers, brandishing a purple psychic energy blade. She was once possessed by the mutant David Xavier, but she was strong enough to overpower him momentarily, which if you know anything about him and his level of power, is not something to scoff at. When Colossus dropped a car on her, her consciousness was powerful enough to jump into the body of a coma patient named Quanon, kind of calling back to how Betsy and Quanon share a connection in the main 616 universe. Number 6. Rogue. Similar to her Prime Universe version, Rogue, or Marion Carlisle, drains the life force and absorbs the memories and abilities of others through skin-to-skin contact, with the caveat being that she can end someone's life if she holds on too long. Now, in the Ultimate Universe, it turns out doing this on a mutant to the point of hitting the end of the line will actually permanently transfer those powers over to Rogue. This happened twice. The first time was with Gambit. She drained his life force when he was already near the end after a fight with the mutant Juggernaut, and she gained his kinetic energy manipulation abilities, plus sometimes his accent. The second time she did this, she drained the powers of Juggernaut himself when he was near death, gaining his abilities permanently, giving her the strength to throw cars, the durability to withstand demolishing buildings, super speed, and limitless stamina. She would use those abilities to help the X-Men. Number 5. Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde, as we know her, is known for her ability to phase herself and others through solid matter. She also has the ability on Earth 1610, but in this universe she discovered she can also minimize the negative space around her atoms, becoming super dense and granting herself extra dimensional mass, giving her enough strength to smash through concrete and metal and punch Spider-Man through the air, making her as hard as diamond and able to withstand attacks from the Phoenix, and making herself weigh 90 tons at peak mass. But that's as well as her phasing ability, which can allow her to walk on air and water. And that's before her exposure to Giant Man Serum to fight Galactus that leveled her up even more, allowing her to increase in size and gain a healing factor. Definitely one of my favorite Ultimate X-Men, and not just because of her romance with Peter Parker. Alright, number 4, Storm. The Omega level mutant known as Storm has a little bit of a different backstory compared to her main universe counterpart. On 1610, Aurora Monroe was an immigrant from Morocco who was found by Professor X living in Athens, Texas, where she'd been stealing cars for a living. When she took a 1978 Mustang for a joyride, the police finally caught up with her, and Aurora used her powers to create a lightning storm to escape. Unlike her main universe counterpart though, she didn't have the training yet to control her powers to such a high degree, and put some children in danger when she summoned the lightning storm, which eventually allowed the police to catch her. Xavier sent Jean Grey to convince the Athens authorities that Aurora was actually an FBI agent and that she was sent to relieve them of the mutant, and she went on to join the X-Men. She is much more sarcastic and rebellious, and also had relationships with both Beast and Wolverine. She didn't just create storms, she created drama.
Finally, number 1. Deadpool. Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe. It's such a blast to read, and I had to include it in here because it's so good. It's so Deadpool. The issue was released in August 2012, and just the front cover, you know what you're getting into. So what's the story here? What are we getting into? What happened to Wade? Well, his mouth wasn't sewn shut, and he didn't have swords for hands. Nothing like that this time, no. The X-Men put Wade into the Ravencroft Asylum in attempts to heal his insanity. The doctor, Psycho Man, was brainwashing Wade in hopes to shut down all of his inner voices, which worked, but now all these voices were replaced with voices that were encouraging him to kill everybody in the Marvel Universe. So it went from bad to worse, and of course Wade's the one to do it. Right off the bat, the series draws you in. I mean, it opens with the Fantastic Four facing off with Wade. Reed gets left all rubbery and left for dead and lifeless. It's really gruesome, but also really fun. Not for the faint of heart, but definitely fun, and obviously super gory.
Number 10. Cyclops and Wolverine's Schism. Schism was basically Wolverine and Cyclops fighting over ideologies, particularly ideologies surrounding the young mutants' minds that they were subjecting to danger literally all the time. Wolverine believed in a more nurturing parental approach, while Cyclops had the idea to treat these youngins like soldiers. Cyclops' approach is bad enough, but the whole initiation of this fight was another low for the mutant Boy Scout. Cyclops founded Utopia, giving mutants a place to live, but a place that was now being threatened by a new Hellfire Club that attacked a group of young X-Men at a museum opening, taking hostages. Cyclops and Wolverine were racing to get there, but were too slow, so, to Wolverine's horror, Cyclops ordered teenage mutant Oya to de-life all the Hellfire soldiers, which she did successfully. The fight between Cyclops and Wolverine then split the mutant community down the middle. Number 9. X-Men vs. Inhumans. The Inhumans were an offshoot of humanity that were experimented on by the Kree, gaining powers from a process called Terrigenesis, using Terrigen mists. Now it turns out, these mists are basically poisonous to the mutant population, and mutants were hurt when mists were released on Earth. The Inhumans in response felt pretty bad and were all for some kind of peaceful resolution to the issue. But Emma Frost made a whole plan that all the mutants, including the X-Men, agreed to except for Beast, Forge, and Rogue. Emma also basically staged the passing of Cyclops at the hands of Black Bolt of the Inhumans to get the mutants to fight back against the Inhumans, who weren't even trying to fight in the first place, causing a whole war between the two groups. It makes no sense, but that's how it is, I guess. If you guys love mutants and these videos, be sure to drop a quick like on this video. It's all you gotta do to show us your support. Thanks, nerds. Number 8. Danger. While working to upgrade the Danger Room by installing Shi'ar technology one night, the Danger Room spoke to Professor Xavier and asked, "Where am I?" Realizing that the Danger Room had mutated and become alive, but still needing to train his X-Men, Professor Xavier made the choice to just ignore and hide the life form from his X-Men. Not smart, since later, the Danger Room began to control other machines in an attempt to gain a body. After sending an Omega Sentinel to battle the X-Men, the Danger Room convinced a student at the school, Wing, to de-life himself, which resulted in the breaking of its prime directive and the physical manifestation of the being named Danger, taking on a female appearance. After locking all of the students in a nightmarish simulation, Danger battled and defeated the X-Men, then went on to do a whole bunch of much worse things herself.
Number 7. Caliban. An albino mutant and a former member of the Morlocks, Caliban made his first comic book appearance in Uncanny X-Men 148. He has the ability to track down any mutant, and he actually sacrifices himself in Logan, where he was played by the hilarious Stephen Merchant. Great film. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's on Disney Plus now, rated R. So good. He was originally an ally to the X-Men, so I'm gonna count him as a hero who switched over to the dark side. Because once he became a tracker for Apocalypse in X-Factor issue 24, titled The Fall of Mutants. So Apocalypse gave him extra strength and renamed him Hellhound, taking the place of the Horseman Death. Number 6. Gazer. Making his first debut in X-Men Volume 2, issue 169, Gazer met the X-Men when a Golgotha invasion was threatening Earth. He was alone on a NASA space station, and due to his mutant abilities, he was the only person that could withstand high levels of radiation. So when these creatures approached Earth, he told Emma Frost, and then the X-Men joined him in space on his observation platform. Again, he wasn't knighted with a sword and deemed an official X-Men or anything like that, no. But he's a mutant who works in space to keep our planet safe, and he calls Emma Frost. So call him what you want, but this man's a hero. He's a bored, lonely hero up in space. He's definitely an X-Men. I'll say he's an X-Men. But then after the events of M-Day, things changed, and so did his morals. He lost his abilities, so now he was experiencing horrible radiation sickness, so he decided to literally jump ship, wanting to go out there instead of passing away alone in here. Fair, I mean, sad, but also makes a lick of sense. It's kind of like George Clooney in Gravity, just floating out in space.
Houston, I lost visual, Dr. Stone.
But while he was drifting in space like a hero, Apocalypse came on by to save his day, thus becoming the Horseman War. Number 5. Sunfire. He made his first debut in X-Men issue 64. Shiro Yashida's mother passed away of radiation poisoning when he was still young, and Shiro was raised by his uncle Tomo to hate the West and return to Japan to their imperial days. So he trained for years and attacked America when the X-Men pulled up to put a stop to it. So Sunfire ended up taking out his uncle and returning to Japan, but then he was sent to destroy an American cargo ship, but then Namor turned him for good. Now he was Japan's protector. When most of the X-Men were captured by Krakoa, Sunfire was recruited by Charles to help. He was named as one of the mythical 12, representing the power of nature alongside Storm and Iceman. So far, so good. But then during a battle with Deathstrike later on, he was presumed dead after an altercation, and the X-Men couldn't find his body. But you know who did? Apocalypse. Yep. He was turning him into the Horseman Famine, and he kind of had control over it, kind of. So he wanted to stay and see if he could help out Gazer, who I'd previously mentioned up there, but they were sadly both turned by the end of the day. At least he tried. Number 4, Forge. Forge is a mutant and a tribal shaman who made his debut in Uncanny X-Men 184. He's known for creating these amazing inventions, and before he worked for the X-Men, he was fighting in the Vietnam War where he would use dark magic to save himself. He rejected the life of a shaman in order to serve. He was able to create advanced cybernetic prosthetics to replace his missing limbs during all these battles. And then after the events of M-Day, Forge searched the multiverse to try and find other mutants. Then there was an alternate world of mutants at war with a group of artificial mutants that were created by Forge. So he was bad. He's a bad guy in another world. Brilliant mind, but it can get him into a little bit of trouble in some of these stories, especially the Ultimate Universe, where he literally sided with Magneto. And during this, he actually created a power amplifier for Magneto to use in order to flip the Earth's magnetic poles and take out every living being on the planet. So thanks, Forge. Really cool. You couldn't have made like an iPhone 14. Cool, that's good too.
Number 3, Professor X Mind Wipe Mark II. It's not just colleagues that Professor X has manipulated. No sir, not by a long shot. But in Giant Size X-Men number 1, Charles Xavier has to put together a brand new X-Men team thanks to the fact that his original X group is being held captive by the living island Krakoa. However, we learn later that this new team wasn't the only one, because Professor X already sent out another new squad of X-Men to save his original team, and they were all horribly killed. Vulcan, Sway, Darwin, and Petra all seem to perish at the hands of Krakoa, and rather than admit his poor decision making, getting a bunch of mutants killed in action, Charles erases the minds of everyone who knew about this team, including Vulcan's older brother, Cyclops, which came and bit him in the butt when Vulcan turned out to be alive and came for some revenge. Number 2, Beast and TERRA Verde. After the mutant nation of Krakoa was founded with its various different organizations and groups, the former X-Men Hank McCoy was put in charge of the intelligence wing of X-Force, which was the mutant nation's equivalent to something like the CIA, for example. This means that Beast is now one of the shadiest damn mutants you ever did see, and one of the most prominent examples of just how shady he now is comes in his response to an attack from the Republic of Terra Verde. Beast modifies the telefloronic biotech of the country of Terra Verde to take complete control of that country and its people. From there, he used them to seed telefloronic listening devices in embassies and basically used the state as a puppet for intel gathering. Hank transformed the nation into a literal puppet state and robbed its people of their free will. And in at number 1 is the secret of mutant resurrection. This one is gonna split a few people, and I'm kind of even on the fence about this one. Basically, if you don't know, in recent comics, mutants on their new nation of Krakoa have devised a means of resurrecting their own using a group of 5 mutants known, surprisingly, as the 5. Resurrection in comic books happens on an almost absurd basis, but this proven method of consistently bringing back the dead is different, and the mutants are very aware of that fact and even go to great lengths to keep it a secret from the rest of the world. The reason kinda makes sense, as 1, they can't really bring back non-mutants anyways, and 2, the amount of people who would be outraged at the fact that the mutants are allowed to revive themselves but us regular humans have to suffer through all the pain and loss of losing a loved one and can't do anything about it, it would just cause mass outrage and further turn the world against mutants. Still, devising the means for resurrection and not even trying to inform the world? Kinda hella sus.